Hey guys, welcome to our part 2 video of the mascots that have fallen from grace. And today I'm going to talk a little bit more, less than a top 10 list, but it's going to be a little bit more of why we need these remasters, why we need some, touchbacks to the late games, the best of the series, and why we need to see those like redone, remade, modern, beautiful, and why that has a benefit on the gaming industry and why it has a benefit for those game series in particular, and especially for younger audiences getting to experience those. Now, some of these points will be obvious, and other ones maybe less so. Maybe they're far-fetched. Maybe I'm just a dreamer. But let me know in the comments if you disagree, if you agree. But let's start talking. Now, lately, we've been getting extremely complex games filled with microtransactions and DLCs and absurd practices that are trying to harp on gamers and trying to steal all their money or whatever. We have greedy corporations stepping in, doing absurd things. And we kind of want to see just the return to simplicity. That's what a lot of gamers are going back to, some classic games or classic game series or whatever, because we just want something simple. We want something grand and adventurous, but not littered with microtransactions or tons of absurdities for that matter, or grinding, or all these kind of non-stop patches and games aren't complete. For example, is the Legend of Zelda. We recently got Breath of the Wild, and people love it because it's both simplistic. It just goes back to the original formula, makes it feel like it's a sequel to the original Legend of Zelda. But it's just a modern edition of that. It's grand and beautiful and 3D, and more games need to start doing this. And I think remasters are a great stepping point so that we can, go back to that era of simplicity and basicness. Now, one of the reasons this is pretty good on a gaming market or for game developers, and maybe not all cases. Obviously, we've only seen a couple of major remasters, and some of them have been more modern, like just, oh, this didn't do well in 360, but let's sell a little bit more in the Xbox One or something like that. But when the Crash Bandicoot trilogy came out, it was received super well, even though some people had a couple gripes because it was modified slightly, but it received well and it sold well, to much of Activision's surprise, and that's why they're like, well, maybe we should do this. Maybe other companies see this, and they're like, hey, we should step in. And you should. We want to see some classic games. There's nothing wrong. Obviously, I want to see new games too, but I don't mind seeing classic games return and being able to enjoy them, especially if I never got to play them or they're before I was born or whatever. I'd love to be able to sit down and play games that were, super well renowned, even though if they really aged poorly, I'd love to be able to sit down. That's why I love going into retro games. That's why I like to collect retro games. It's because they're just classics. They feel so good to play, even if they're not, up to modern standards. Now, obviously, I kind of hinted at it towards in yesterday's video. But in the top 10 video, we kind of talked about why these corrupted versions, so taking Sonic, for example, our number one, Sonic is really not doing well these days. Sonic Forces didn't do well. Most of their latest games didn't do well. It's kind of like what happened to the great, Sega mascot. I think going back to basics might be a good fresh start. Obviously, Sonic's been trying to get a lot of fresh starts, but even like Spyro, the remastered, with Crash last year, if Mega Man were to get some remasters, or whoever, if we get these remasters or these touchbacks or whatever they are, it offers an opportunity for a fresh start. We could see them start to, instead of trying to come up with something new completely, go back to basics. So say Sega remastered Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and released them in a bundle. It allows the developers, the modern developers, the current developers that they have, to go back and see how those games were built, and they get to touch them up and they get to rebuild them. And they get to have new graphical assets and stuff like that they can work with. And from there, they can build a new Sonic game, say Sonic Adventure 3, built off of how the originals were built. So that way, we're playing games that feel true and genuine and play like the very well-received ones. Obviously, there's going to have to be some updates because, Sonic Adventure 2 is an old game, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't, persist today in modern gaming. But it allows those developers to kind of learn and build things for those classical games that we can then build off of and introduce new fans. We get old fans to come back and just new games based off of the well-known ones. If Crash 4, for some reason they called it Crash 4, came out and it was built just like Crash 1 through 3, I am willing to bet it's probably going to be done fairly well because those developers are building them off of assets and off of models and off of everything they learned from the Crash remasters. Now, that's all speculation. Obviously, many things could go wrong, but you have a better chance than someone coming up with a new Crash game, like the Mutant games, or Twinsanity was okay, but warped, you know, something to build off of that brings us back to a fresh start from the classic trilogy. Same thing with Sonic, or not Sonic, Spyro, where Spyro is like, well, we had The Legend of Spyro, which was very different from the originals. We had, you know, Enter the Dragonfly, we had the mobiles, we have Skylanders. It's like, what happened to good old-fashioned Spyro? Now, say Toys for Bob comes in, makes good old-fashioned Spyro, and then they build Spyro 4 off of good old-fashioned Spyro, and it goes super well, because they're familiar now with the system. Toys for Bob has a passion for Spyro. I think a couple of good examples might be some other series that have kind of returned to their roots, and it's kind of hard to find, you know, perfect examples, because every time they have to do it, they have to adapt slightly. Look at the Tomb Raider reboot. It kind of simplifies everything, but it goes back to basics. I mean, it borrows from Uncharted, but it's very simple. Or Devil May Cry. I know Devil May Cry 4 wasn't, you know, released very well, or seen very well, or whatever. But the Devil May Cry series is kind of going back to basics, and there's a lot of series that could really use it right now. I would love to see Halo go back to basics, just like we mentioned yesterday. Like the super complex, you know, microtransaction, rec pack, whatever in Halo isn't seen very well right now. I mean, we need more games to go back. Mega Man, Pac-Man, how that did. Let's see some simplistic remasters and then build up off of those, off of classic gameplay, off of classic games. Now I know this has been a little bit me rambling and kind of maybe wishful thinking. Maybe you agree, and I'm just, you know, maybe I'm just thinking stupid things, or I just want these old games to be redone because they're favorites or whatever. I mean, the point of this video is I want to see some games really go back to basics, and I want to see these remasters so I can play beautiful versions of these games that I love or I really want to experience that I haven't gotten to. As well as I'd love to see these franchises come back, because some of the modern games, they're not that good. Most of the modern games these days, they're either filled with microtransactions or there's some sort of controversy, whether they're racist or sexist or all these other things going on. And while there are some great games, there's a lot of poor games. And I'd love to see these classic series redone, rebuilt, and built off of, so that way we can experience some of, you know, gaming's true legends and the way they're supposed to be played, not so much the modern versions that are skewed and broken and don't feel that good to play. Other than that, guys, I hope you check back to STG. I hope you agreed or disagreed. Let me know in the comments. Give me a like on the video, and I'll see you guys in the game.